there's so many stories out there, and you went to Mississippi and covered one of those stories in terms of who is being impacted by the lack of abortion rights, and like what are they going through, and I feel like there's hundreds of thousands of stories for every one person we profile. But I guess I wanted to ask you, what happened in Mississippi? Like, what happened as soon as Dobbs came down? As in other red states. But explain.
Right. So Mississippi had already passed what's called a trigger law, basically, and it was bipartisan legislation, actually, to if Roe v. Wade ever fell, it would automatically go into effect and ban basically all abortions in the state. So Mississippi is also the state where the Dobbs case originated. It was brought by the last remaining abortion clinic in the state over a 15-week abortion ban that the legislature tried to pass, which made its way to the Supreme Court. In the Dobbs decision, they overturned Roe v. Wade. So after that, as soon as the state attorney general certified that had happened, the trigger law was set to go into effect. And on July 7th of last year, the state had banned abortion.
And in terms of like surrounding states that also applied, or what was your sense of, because I know that many Mississippians would seek abortions in other states.
Right. Yeah. If you look at the map where abortion is banned right now, Mississippi is basically right at the center, like right in the middle of a bunch of states that have also banned abortion. There's no bordering state where it's currently legal. And a lot of those states had similar trigger bans that went into effect pretty quickly. So very quickly, not only is abortion banned in Mississippi, but as you're saying, there was nowhere nearby to go to get an abortion. And that's just a trend that's continued. More and more states have passed bans or limits, and access is disappearing very rapidly in the South. And so some people have been able to travel, but we know that tens of thousands have not been able to, and have likely ended up being forced to give birth.
So, and you profiled someone. Oh, go ahead, Megan.
I just want to say, I'm from Indiana. I'm from a Midwestern state. And there was a 12-year-old child who was brought to Indiana from Ohio.
Yes.
Who was a victim of rape. And the abortion was performed in Indiana, which would now be illegal there. And the doctor in Indiana has faced punishment and was fined by the state there. So I think we do look at the South and be like, whoa, but it's like, it's seemingly, it's moving north. It's spreading to states too. I mean, Indiana's a red state. Ohio is red and not coming back, but it's gone to other places that you're like, oh, this is knocking on the doors of homes that we thought had more rational people inside of them.
Yep. I think and the board they fined her, the doctor, on some bullshit too. Yeah. Like, it was like, you violated the patient's HIPAA rights. It's like, no, you didn't. No, she didn't. No. It was like they find other ways other than the actual, what they're really talking about, which is performing the abortion on a 10-year-old rape victim, to punish people that it isn't related necessarily to that act. They're like, oh, you violated. No, she didn't. She didn't. Anyway, that is one case. But this is, you profiled, her name is Latiana Halbert, if I'm pronouncing that right. Lashana, thank you. Lashana Halbert, 26. She's already a mom. Tell me about her and what happened.
Yeah, she's very typical of the kinds of people who seek abortions. She had a 4-year-old son. She wanted to give him a sibling someday, but she wanted it to be under the right conditions. They live in an apartment. She works full time, but she makes $8.50 an hour, and it's just really hard to make that stretch. Her now fiance Kendall also works, and he makes better money as a welder, but he's working basically nonstop all the time. She wants to move out of Jackson. I mean, Jackson, Mississippi has been subject to, this water crisis, and the potholes there are crazy. She wanted to live in a better neighborhood, or even maybe move states. She wanted a better school and opportunities for her existing son, Royalty, before she had another kid. Just all these things to be in place. Yeah. And then last summer, just a few weeks after the trigger law in her state went into effect, she found out that she was pregnant, and looked into making an abortion appointment online with what would have been the last existing clinic, only to pretty quickly figure out that it had been shuttered by the trigger law. Looked into traveling. The best that she and her fiance could come up with was going to Philadelphia, but the procedure alone would have been hundreds of dollars, and then there would have been travel, and they just did not have the money at all. And so
right, it was what, $700 according to your reporting to get for the abortion, not including obviously airfare, hotel, whatnot.
Exactly. And there are funds out there. There are abortion funds that make travel money available, but I think it's hard to connect those to everyone who needs them. I don't think people are necessarily aware that those exist. The other thing too is that she was afraid of criminalization. She was afraid that if she left to get her state to get an abortion and came back, that she'd be arrested. And while that's not explicitly in Mississippi's law, I mean, you were just talking about the Indiana case. I think it's really just a real Wild West. People are afraid, rightfully afraid. Things are changing a lot. She has a son. She has a job. There was no way she was going to risk getting arrested either. So she ended up deciding to go through with being forced really to go through with the pregnancy, and had her baby at the end of January.
Wow. Yeah. And luckily was a healthy baby. I mean, and she was healthy given Black maternal mortality rates in this country and how little we care for actual moms once they become moms again. But can I just clarify, did she actually call Jackson Women's Health to see if they had appointments?
She went on their website and tried to make an appointment there and just never heard back. And it was a day or so later, she was watching the news at her mom's house, and there was a segment about the trigger ban going into effect. And she put two and two together and was like, oh, that's why I didn't hear back. I can't get an abortion.
Jesus, the actual epicenter of this. And I actually wanted to, because there was another tidbit in there that's healthcare related, which is that she was using birth control. I believe the implant.
It's a hormonal implant in the arm.
Right.
I don't know what brand, so it's a long acting contraception, but it does expire. And so hers had expired, and she went to get it taken out, and she has private insurance through her job at a school, but it's terrible. It costs a ton of money just to have the policy, and then to use it is hundreds of dollars. So it cost her $300 to get it out. She didn't have the money to put a new one in. And I think in her mind was sort of like, okay, I'll just do it as soon as I've got the money. It'll be fine. And within a month, she was pregnant.
It's just and then that's sort of, the crux of it, right? This is reproductive healthcare is about all healthcare. It's about how inaccessible it is in general. Not only that abortion is healthcare, but that contraception is also healthcare. I mean, it's kind of, what's really fucked, and I don't know, Megan, how you feel about this, but it's I think there's now a push, especially in red states, for okay, well then what about free contraception for everybody, or low cost, if you're forcing people into birth. But it feels, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it feels like we're already ceding territory. I believe in that. I agree with that. But it feels like, oh, now we're fighting on this new battle line that you just drew.
Well, and it's almost, I speak publicly about it. I had a state-funded abortion in New York, and I was on birth control. And I always feel the need to say, well, I was on birth control. It's it really doesn't matter if I was or not. I was on bad health insurance, and I was on the incorrect dosage for my age. And so it's all these dominoes of, well, this kind of and I am a middle class white woman, and I wasn't at the time, but it's I could have had so many other ways of getting out of the situation, and I still did not find a way to get out of it. And besides having an abortion, you brought up there's not clean water. She is having a child in a place where there is not water that is clean and safe for them to drink. And it's that should be reason enough to go, oh, I actually don't want to bring a child into this situation.
Yes.
The other thing too is that, maybe there's some talk about expanding access to contraception, but I'm just dubious that there are lawmakers in these states who really want to take action to help families. Mississippi hasn't expanded Medicaid. It only just this year expanded postpartum Medicaid coverage for up to a year. Otherwise, Lashana would have been kicked off 60 days after giving birth. So, and gone back onto her awful, crappy private health insurance. And she's lucky to have health insurance at all in a state like that. There were all sorts of proposals this session in Mississippi to do lots of things: raise the minimum wage, enact paid family leave, increase childcare subsidies. None of it happened. Instead, they've given tax credits to crisis pregnancy centers, and they want to use their state surplus to eliminate the income tax. Like, these are the priorities. So I've heard some state lawmakers sort of talk about, like, okay, now we're going to step up for families, and I just have not seen it happen really anywhere.
Yeah.
Because I think that's part of the plan of they want people to be saddled with costs and children that they cannot care for. I also think her believing that it would be criminal of her to travel out of the state is part of the plan. They want people to think that there's nowhere that they can go.
Yes.
Right. I was just reading a story about the day that Pink House closed, the last remaining clinic in Mississippi. Or sorry, not the day it closed, the day that the Dobbs decision came down, and it was very much open. They stayed open up until July 7th, 7 days a week, seeing 40 to 50 patients a day. But the anti-abortion protesters went down to the end of the road and started telling people, Roe v. Wade was overturned, the clinic is closed, go home. They don't care really what's on the books. They just want to spread fear around this as much as possible.
Well, this is again, someone from the outside who has not worked in this space and, just sort of like raging. But I am actually kind of astounded that the clinics that were providing abortion have closed, and that a lot of them haven't even stayed open for general reproductive care, right? Or access to contraception. A lot of them have just simply closed out of fear of, being criminalized or any kind of lawsuit or whatnot. But that also, like, doctors are consulting with their hospital's legal team before performing basic, like DNIs, or I believe they're right, or just like any kind of like treatment of someone who is miscarrying, who has like an ectopic pregnancy, that like, and maybe I'm being harsh, but like the medical field and even some of these abortion providers are like so shook and aren't actually able to, for whatever reason, take a stand to continue operating. Like, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I feel like I have heard from doctors that they do not want to go to red states to perform their, to continue their specialty. And it's more because they don't think that they can give patients the quality of care that they would like to be able to, not even, but like they take an oath. And I think they think to go to these places, it is in direct conflict with the oath that they take, because they can't actually perform the services that they're supposed to as doctors.
Right.
There are some clinics who have stayed open for other care, for other types of care. I do know the Pink House, the owner, did close the clinic, but relocated to as close to state by as she could. And I think a lot of clinics have tried to do that to make themselves as close by and available as they can. I mean, I think they're facing really bad choices.
Yes.
I do wish we saw more doctors pushing the limits of the law and not feeling, sort of self-regulating themselves before. I think that they've been very cautious to the point of not giving care where they probably could. And I wish we could see a little bit more boldness there. But I think, we've put everybody in an awful position. This should just be legal and accessible. And people are now extremely scared and working in very confusing and shifting legal regimes. I don't know. I think it's really hard out there.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm still waiting for the floating abortion clinic. I was promised last year was the story, and I don't know what's going on. Dr. Meg Autry, I got you, girl. She's at UCSF. What the hell? When's it coming? Just dock up in the Gulf and help people. But yeah, I mean, you write on the economy, Bryce, and I believe you're also a parent. Is that correct?
I am, yeah.
You know, and so is Megan, and so am I. And everything is just coming at us real fast and hard here as moms, as who have many women have left the workforce thanks to the pandemic. Now, for sure, in the wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned effectively, and having no extra support for families at all, as you mentioned, just economically, like, do you think this is something in 10 years when you're going to be reporting, or 5 years, like that we're going to see the impact on women specifically of these decisions?
I do. I do. I mean, the data is really clear that women who seek abortions and aren't able to get them are far more likely to fall into poverty, to not be working, to have to give up on their life dreams, to end up in debt, to end up evicted. I mean, the list goes on, and it continues on for years and years afterward. And that was true before Dobbs, because abortion access was already incredibly spotty in this country. But now we have huge swaths of the country where people cannot get an abortion where they live, and often don't have the means to get one somewhere else. And that's what they face. And they know that's what they face. That's why these women are going to seek abortions in the first place. A lot of them, the majority of them, are already parents, and they know what it means to bring a child into the world, and what it costs to take care of them, and what it takes from their careers and their lives to care for children. And they say, I know I'm not ready. If I do this now, this is going to set everything off on a bad path. And then they don't get the abortion, and they're proven right. And yes, I think in 5 years, 10 years, there will be higher poverty. There will be people who are not giving our economy and our society what they were meant to give us. Basically, their productivity, their dreams, their dignity are going to be squashed. And I do think that will show up in economic data for sure.
Mm-hmm. MAGA, everybody. Amazing. Anything else, Megan, you want to add, or Bryce, you want to add?
I think that the data is pretty clear that the kids go on to not have great existences too. I think it will also, and I don't want to say the big C word like it's scary, but crime increases. If you have children brought into the world that do not have a great situation, or a want, then a lot of things go poorly for not just the mom, but for the family unit and the community as a whole.
Yeah.
I mean,
we saw their potential too. Sorry.
No, exactly. I mean, there are specific stats that link not only to a lack of lead paint being used in homes, that was number one, but then also when contraception came out and the pill came out, was oh, amazing. And then there was a deep correlation in whatever it was, 15, 20 years to lower crime rates. But Megan, you're not on the Supreme Court. You're not an oligarch who's how can I uphold my agenda and my white minority rule and give more money to the military and the police, and have little worker bees that are paid nothing? That's the agenda. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.